Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the parsha class, Parsha HaBracha, 5783. Tonight is Hoshana Rabbah, a beautiful night to learn Torah and to learn the last parsha of the Torah. The last parsha of the Torah, HaBracha. Moshe Rabbeinu is close to his death. This is his last day on earth, and he decides to bless the Jewish people with all the good blessings that he thinks that will help them grow closer to Hashem, and from which they can benefit. Let's look at the verses themselves and see what we can learn from Moshe's blessings. All right, Hashem, here we are. Parsha begins first verse in the Parsha, chapter 33, verse 1. And this is where the Torah, where this Parsha gets its name. It says, V'zot HaBracha asher birach Moshe, ish ha'elokim et b'nei Yisrael lifnei moto. This is the blessing that Moshe, man of God, is giving to the Jewish people before he dies. And right here on the spot, the Or HaChaim asks a question that we wouldn't think to look at. What's the very first letter of this parsha? Vizot. The Vav is always a connector. It's in English as well. It means the word and it connects this parsha, in this case, to the previous parsha somehow. But it's not very clear how. So we look at the words of the Or HaChaim, and he brings down, it's a long piece, just realized. Let's see the part we would like to focus on. He gives several answers to this question. Let's start with where it says letter bet here. Nira she nitkaven hakatuv l'shavach ish elokim magadu ma'asav. The verse wants to show how great Moshe is. How's the Vav show how great he is? Right? Hine haparsha hakudemet lezeh samuch lema'amar v'zot habracha. The parsha that came before, right before, it was close to it. It said v'zot, and then it says v'zot habracha milfanecha amar hakatuv hachalet hagzera al Moshe lamut be'omro. Although there was a decree for Moshe to die at this point, Allah al-Har ha'evarim, he went to this mountain, Mot, and he's supposed to die there. Allah shared. The verse previous to this is basically the command that Moshe had to die. It's a terrible thing. Inke Yerma ha'omer, Hizem Moshe ha'ish, Tina haya bilibo al mitato. Maybe a normal person in this kind of situation might be a little bit bitter in his heart about the fact that he has to die, that he's punished because of the Jewish people, really, that he's unable to enter Eretz Yisrael. So maybe he's going to be a little bitter about the situation. And the answer is, says the Holy Or HaChaim, it says, Ha'ira katuv ala bracha hayota mu'ula ushlema b'chol libo. He gave the blessing with all his heart. That's why the letter Vav is written in the beginning of Vizot HaBracha, L'ha'ir al ma rov godla, to make it very clear how great this blessing is. In other words, we have a situation where Moshe is within his rights to be upset about the entire situation, and he's being basically banned from Eretz Yisrael, and and it's the Jewish people's fault, really. And he could be upset. Instead of being upset, what does he do? He gives the Jewish people a blessing. And this blessing isn't just like, just perfunctory, sort of, I guess I'm leaving and I'm about to die, so, God bless. God bless the United States of America. No, that's not what he's doing. He's wholeheartedly blessing the Jewish people. He's very, he wants the best for them. And that's how he leaves them. And that's what he goes on to say in this commentary. There's, of course, more to say on that. and he does, and maybe in future years we can focus a little more on that. But what I'd really want to spend time on is this next verse, or actually not exactly this verse, but the next one instead. We'll get to it. Chapter 33, verse 2. Very next verse, it says, "Vayomer Hashem Sinai ba." This is Hashem's said. So he's saying, this is Moshe saying that God came from Sinai, V'zarach Meseir, and he glowed upon them, he shone upon them from Seir, Lamo, Hofiel Mehar Paran. He appeared to them from Mount Paran. By the way, all of these are actual places, but they're also references to different nations, right? Seir is Esav, etc. V'ata mivot kodesh mimino eish dat lamo. And he approached from this place, Mivot Kodesh, and gave them eish dat. So it's translates as eish dat, means fire law, right? The law of fire, or the fire of law. I'm not really sure how you would translate that particularly, but it's a very strange phrase, and it seems to imply that Torah is somehow an eish. Torah is somehow a fire, and we want to know how that's possible. And to that, we're going to turn to Rabbeinu Bachya. Rabbeinu Bachya, one of the early commentaries on the Torah, student of the Ramban, Nachmanides. He says, the Midrash, this is not by the way, interestingly enough, this is not his comment on this verse. This is comment on a verse in Shemot 14:22. So he says, the Midrash, Haimim lahem choma Torah nimshalet lamayim, shayu atidim lekabel haita megina kachoma. So there's a reason why Torah is compared to water. And then he says, while we're on the subject, Miminam mismalam miminam bischuta Torah ne'amar miminam eish dat lamo mismalam elu tefillin shenotlim bismael. So the Bismillah. Okay. So the Eish Dat is the Torah, which represents sort of the right, and the tefillin, which is given on the left hand, right-handed person puts tefillin onto their left arm, usually, and so that's like the tefillin is on the left and the Torah is on the right. But there's more to it. What he's hinting to here has to do with the Gemara in Yuma, and the Talmud in Yuma 72b says like this, a very fascinating statement. It says, Amar Abaye v'tema Bar Ula, Nikra Nit'av. It says that this isn't the right quote. Anyway, but yeah, okay, yeah, we could use it like this. So a person who is not following in the way of the Torah is called nit'av, considered disgusting. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk in Eov, av ki nit'av v'nelach ish shotek hamayim avla. So the disgusting is a person who drinks this iniquity like water. This is the wrong quote, I think, from the Gemara there in Yuma. What I wanted to point out was that the Torah is compared to different things. The Torah has different powers depending on how you use it. So Torah, if it's used correctly, can be very beneficial, can be a medicine almost for any ill that you have. But if the Torah is misused, it can become loathsome. It can become disgusting, and not only that, it can actually feed off of somebody's bad midot and make that person even worse. There's a famous comment I think we've mentioned in previous years from the Vilna Gaon about on last week's parsha, on not last week, but on Parshat Hazinu, right, where it compares Torah to water, and water is this thing that can be can make grass grow, but could also make weeds grow. The Torah can do the same thing, and so the same kind of idea is here about fire. Torah is also like fire because fire can be beneficial. It can, light up a room. It can warm you up. It can cook your food. But it can also be destructive. Fire can cause damage. Can cause fire, etc. Hence the name. So the same idea that just like Torah can be destructive and Torah can be healthy, depending on how you use it, is a common theme throughout the Torah, and that's how it can be compared to fire. It's a dangerous thing. We don't want to mess around with Torah, and especially Torah that's almost correct but wrong. Can be very confusing to people and can cause very big mistakes. Our next source is the verse, one of the most famous verses in the Torah, I would say, because according to the Shulchan Aruch, and we've talked about this last year, the first thing that a parent should teach his children is this verse. As soon as they're able to speak, you're supposed to teach them Torah Tziva Lana Moshe Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. Torah is been commanded to us by Moshe, and it's a morasha. It's an inheritance to the Kehila of Yaakov, to the congregation of Yaakov. So, interesting question. Why are we talking about Yaakov here? What are the Jewish people usually called? Bnei Yisrael. Why are we calling the Jewish people Yaakov at this point? And the answer is going to be hopefully very enlightening to us. The answer comes from Yaakov Kamenetsky and Emet Liakov. It says Bir Lashon Yaakov Shehishtamesh Bo Hakatuv Kan. He wants to explain why we're using the word Yaakov here. V'chein Bir Havat Kehilat Yaakov. Why the congregation of Yaakov? Below Zeria, not the seed of Yaakov, or Bnei Yaakov, the children of Yaakov, Bechol Makom, as we're called in every other place. Nira Shebepasuk Zeh. Shahagdir hakatuv et mehut haTorah bedavka katav kan. Again, it shows the greatness of Torah that it was written just like this. Hine yeshno havdel mehumot bein Toratam shel Yisrael leTorat haumot. This verse, calling the Torah a morasha, an inheritance of Kehilat Yaakov, emphasizes the huge difference between the Torah of the Jewish people and the Torah of the nations of the world. What does that mean, the Torah of the nations of the world? In other words, the religions of other nations, all of the other religions of the world. The Bavor, She'etzel, Shar, Ha'umot. That regarding all other nations, Toratam, Hi Rak Moreshet Yichidim. It's for them, it's an inheritance of only unique individuals. Rak legedolehem, and the greatest of them. V'chachmehem, and it's left for their wise people. It's not for everybody. Ki halo rak miut katan mehem miben Toratam ubedatam. Only small minority of them have actual Torah or are able to use that Torah, to concentrate their power. The knowledge of Torah, the knowledge of their own religion, is focused on a small group, on a small, you want to call it a caste, you want to call it, perhaps, it would be accurate to call it a class. Our Torah is given to Kehilat Yaakov, to all the Jewish people. So that's why it's not Yisrael. Aval etzel Yisrael haTorah hi chelkat lirushatam ha'am kulo. It's the inheritance of the entire Jewish people. Sorry.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. No worries. All right. So it's an inheritance of the entire Jewish people, not just the upper class, not just the the religious caste or something like that. Everybody has an ability to gain in Torah knowledge. It's not the prerogative. It's not in the domain of any one particular group, and that makes the Jewish people very different from all other nations of the world. And that's why it's Morasha Kehilat Yaakov specifically. It says Aval Yaakov Milashon Ekev Romez Lahamon Kulo. It's a hint to the entire nation, not the upper class, which might be thought of. You might think Yisrael means the greatest of the Jews or something like that. No, Yaakov implies the regular Jew, Joe Schmo, literally. Right? Uh, so uh, it's interesting that he writes this because I like to read history books, and I've got a few that talk about a similar theme in different places. I'm looking at a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel, not a religious book by any means, but it also says early states had state religions and standardized temples. Many early kings were considered divine and were accorded special treatment in innumerable respects. For example, the Aztecs and Inca emperors were both carried about in litters. Servants went ahead of the Inca emperor's litter and swept the ground clear. The Japanese language includes special forms of the pronoun you for use only in addressing the emperor. Early kings were themselves the head of the state religion, or else had separate high priests. The Mesopotamian temple was a center not only of religion, but also of economic redistribution, writing, and crafts technology. All these features of states carried to an extreme the developments that led from tribes to chiefdoms. In addition, though, states had diverged from chiefdoms in several new directions. The most fundamental distinction is that states are organized in political and territorial lines, etc., etc. So, in just the history of how a nation is born, governments and bureaucracy are born. In this example, religion is used as a tool of power in order for the king, in this case, the emperor, in the case of Japan, Inca, etc., for them to hold on to their power. A religious class is developed for them to have that power. So that's just an interesting insight from that perspective. But even later on in history, the beginning of the Renaissance in Europe, wonderful book about that particular time period called A World Lit Only by Fire. Look what he says here about literacy. He says literacy rates varied from place to place, from time to time, but some general figures are available. This is the end of the Dark Ages, right? The percentage of those who could not read at all was 0% in the clergy and professions. In other words, in clergy and professions, there was no such thing as somebody who couldn't read. Among gentry, it was 2%, yeomen 35%, craftsmen 44%, peasants 79%, and laborers 85%. By trade, 6% of the grocers were illiterate, 9% of the haberdashers, 12%, while merchants, 27% of bakers, 36% of innkeepers, 41% of brewers, 44% of tailors, etc., etc. It goes through all different professions, 90% shepherds, 97% of all thatchers. In one important sense, these figures, though reasonably accurate, are misleading. They represent comprehension of the vernacular or colloquial tongues, Spanish, Portuguese, English, French, Dutch, Flemish, Danish, German, and Tuscan, which is Italian. Some grasp of the vernacular was sought by everyone who wished to raise himself in the world, but in most of Europe, Latin was still the language of the elite. Right? They had their own language. The greater the person, the church, the scholars, scientists, governments, and the courts, they all spoke Latin. So, wow, you can read in Italian, but what are you reading? You're reading like stuff that's not going to help you get any higher, get any better, or grow in any way. If you really wanted to learn how to read and read something that's worthwhile, worth your time, you'd have to learn how to read Latin. So during 1501, for example, in France, 80 volumes were published in Latin, only 8 in French. In Aragon, so like just look at the publication history of those times, right? This is 500 years ago, right? We have a figure of 80 to 8 when it comes to works that are published in a language that's worthwhile learning, right? between 1510 and 1540, 115 were printed in Latin, just 5 in Spanish. Indeed, throughout the 16th century, Latin-dominated works displayed at the annual Frankfurt Book Fair. Several reasons account for its survival. It's still the language of international communication. If you want to address the European public and be universally understood, you had to use it. There was a religious, by the way, Latin is a religious language, right? So there was a language you had to know in order to advance. In countries whose languages were rarely learned by foreigners, Flemish, German, and yes, English, Latin was the language of choice. Those who preferred the colloquial were few and were sometimes resented by their peers. When the great French surgeon Ambrose Paré chose to publish his work on the method of treating gunshot wounds, I'm not even going to try to bother reading that. He was reproached by colleagues on the faculty of medicine at Paris. The church aggressively opposed vernacular languages. Authors hesitated to use their native tongues because they were at the mercy of printers, foremen, and compositors. Thus, in an English so etc. So the point is that if you wanted to, you needed to know a certain kind of knowledge in order to advance yourself, and that goes all the way back to what we started off with from Rav Kamenetsky. That's why it's Torah Tzivilanu Morasha Kilat Yaakov, because we don't have an elite that has to know this, and as opposed to everybody else who's not allowed to know this. Everybody's allowed entrance into the elite. It's a marasha for all. It's an inheritance for all the Jewish people. All the Jewish people are equally able to grow and become great in Torah. You don't need to know a special language that only the elite know. It happens to be, let's call a spade a spade. Let's be honest here. Fact is, nowadays you pretty much need to know Hebrew, and some would say even Yiddish, if you want to advance in the Torah world. But there's so many books being published in English and so many opportunities to learn Hebrew and Yiddish and everything else that nobody is really excluded. Anybody can be a great scholar if they're given the time to learn and the ability and the desire to do so. Okay, we're going to skip now to chapter 33, verse 18. And we're getting into the actual blessings. Each tribe, or almost each tribe, is blessed. And we're going to start with this particular blessing to Zvulun, because it seems to skip something. Right before Zvulun should have been Yissachar, and Zvulun Amar Smach Zvulun B'tzeitecha. Zvulun should be happy when they go out. Yissachar be'ohalecha, and Yissachar in its tent. But that's all we hear about Yissachar. We don't know anything else. We're not explained why why he's not really blessed here. So for an answer, we're going to turn to the Netziv in Hemek Davar. And he says, "Le'olam zot al Yisrael b'sha'ah sheyotzim lemilchama." So this is relevant to the Jewish people when they were going out to war. And by the way, there's what to say about this still today, as you'll see in a moment. But in the time when we went out to war, some people were chosen, some people were set aside to learn Torah and to pray. They would all day long they would pray and learn in their tents in the field. Rosh Parsha Matot Shebamilchamet Hadin Laku Yudbeit Elef L'Tfila. So when they went out to war, there's still 12,000 who would be praying for them. V'sham shenanu cherev l'shonam b'kol Torah b'de'ita b'megillah Let me see where. Right. So, where was I? He quotes different places where the Jewish people went to war, and each time they went to war and did battle, there were people who were set aside, reserved specifically for prayer and for Torah learning. And so when it says here, when Moshe tells Zevulun to rejoice, Amar Samach Zevulun, that Zevulun is supposed to somehow be happy, the implication is that they have a reason to feel confident about war. They don't have to worry about a thing, because while they're going out to war, Yissachar is in their tents, and they are praying, and they're davening, and the merit of that is going to save the soldiers. Right? So, and like I said, this has a lot of relevance to today, when there are, there's always controversy, especially in Israel. There's always controversy about the yeshiva students not serving in war. And of course, there are many yeshiva students who do serve in the army. But of those who don't, it's important to remember that we need somebody to stay at home for that kind of inspiration. We even have we had the same idea, lahavdil. We have the same idea for in America during, say, the Vietnam War. Right, there was a draft, and some people were excluded from the draft because they were needed to stay home and be the scholars, to be the military intelligence. Right, we need a group of people who are not fighting. We need a group of people who are creating merits or being the reason to fight. Right? We need people back home as well. Not everybody is fit for battle, and a Torah scholar certainly is not. A Yissachar should stay in its tent, and a Zvulun can go out and go to battle and have nothing to worry about, because Yissachar is back home taking care of things. Okay. I just have two more comments today. It doesn't have to be a full hour, I don't think, unless you have questions about the parsha. We can definitely deal with that. But or any other kind of questions. But first, I'd like to two comments left today. Let's skip all the way to the next tribe that we can look at, chapter 33, verse 22. Uladan Amar Dan Gur Aryeh Yizanek Min Habashan. He said regarding Dan, he said that Dan is a Gur Aryeh, which is a young lion. Yizanek Min Habashan. He's jumping from the Bashan. Beautiful prayer, beautiful blessing for Dan. The only question that we can ask, and it's probably worth asking, and you would assume that there's supposed to be some sort of parallel between this blessing and the last blessing that these people received. When was the last time they were blessed? They were blessed at the end of Sefer Shemot in Parshat Vayechi. They were blessed by Yaakov. Yaakov gave each tribe a blessing too. And the blessing that Yaakov gave Dan is that Dan should be a wise judge. Very nice, beautiful blessing. But how does being a lion have anything to do with being a judge? Like, what's the connection? So there has to be something, and the Kli Yakar will help us find it, I hope. Lefi Yaakov Amar Dan Yadin Amo. It says that Dan will be a judge for the nation. V'chol Dayan Tzarich liyot Gibor Ka'ari. Every single judge has to be as strong as a lion. Why? Kamash Katav, it says in Shemot, Ve'ata Techze Mikol Ha'am Anshe Chayil. Moshe was supposed to choose judges to work with him, and he had to pick great people, strong people. Shelo Yigor Min Bale Dinim Im Yesh Bahem Eza Elam Alkain Amar Ledan Shaya Gur Ari Zanek Min Habasha. When he's the judge, and when he's got plaintiffs and defendants and everything else standing in front of him, he's going to be the judge, he has to be strong. He can't be intimidated by any of the witnesses or by anybody else. Let's say he has a case involving the mob, right? The mafia, the Jewish mafia. So you can't say, "Oh, I'm too scared. What are they going to do? They might, attack me. They might attack my family. They might, uh, you know, uh, force me out of my job. They might strong arm me. Who knows?" So they can't be afraid of that. They have to be as confident and as strong as a lion. And that's the connection between a judge and a lion. And that's why both of these blessings complement each other. And by the way, all of the blessings do. We didn't take the time to go through all 12 blessings. But if you go through them and make a parallel chart to the blessings that each tribe received from Yaakov, you'll see that there's a lot of very beautiful connections. Okay. Last but not least, after he gives the blessings, Moshe goes and dies. Very sad part of the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, who has been really the star of the show since the beginning of Sefer Shemot, now goes and dies. And regarding his death, the very last verses of the Torah, it says, "V'yivku b'nei Yisrael et Moshe ba'arbat Moav." In this place, Arbat Moav, where they last saw him, that's where the Jewish people cried for him. Shloshim yom, 30 days straight. V'yitmu yimei b'chi evel Moshe. And here's the part I'd like to focus on. It says, V'yitmu ended, V'yitam, right? V'yitmu yimei b'chi evel Moshe. The days of crying over the mourning of Moshe ended at that point. Rav Zalman Saratskin in Oznaim Torah asked the question: when it comes to Aaron, he was also mourned for a long time, but it doesn't say that it ended. Parshat Chukat, Katavnu Od Tam, we gave another reason, Lama Harbu Libchot Kol Mitat Aaron, that Aaron's death was cried for so much. Yipnei Shinimtzu Az B'tzara Gedola, they were in a great pain about it. Keshem Nayim V'Nadim Mem Shana B'Midbar Umenagihem Marim Meta. So they knew that they had 40 years in the desert, and when Aaron died, they didn't have anything to really look forward to except this punishment of being in the desert till the end of that time. Nistalku and then they lost the clouds of glory. That's one of the reasons we celebrate Sukkot, is because the clouds of glory return. V'naglu le'enei ha'amim, and they in front of the eyes of all the people, they were vulnerable. All the other nations of the world could attack them now that they didn't have these ananei hakavod. They were scared, so that's why the mourning for Aaron did not really, quote unquote, end. Mavakshim et nafsham, and they basically they were almost giving up their lives. Aval Gish and Istalek Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe Rabbeinu left them, Kvar Kevesh Lifnehem Eretz Sichon v'Og. They've already conquered the lands of Sichon and Og. Patach Lifnehem, and it's open in front of them. Et Hashar ha'aretz Canaan. All of the land of Canaan was open in front of them. They can now go. Look, it's just, he quotes there Rashi. Libam Tovalem, and their hearts were warm and happy. Right, they're about to go into Eretz Yisrael. They're about to fulfill that mitzvah. Misha Nimsa b'metzav ruach tov merumam inan marbe livchot. And whoever has a good thing to look forward to, a positive thing going on, a happy time is about to occur, like entering Eretz Yisrael, that tempers their sadness. They're not as sad as they would have been, and that's why the pasuk has to make clear that the mourning for Moshe ended. Right? It's not just that that they have no feelings for him, or they loved Aaron more, which again, many of the commentaries say things to that effect. The more important thing is that they have something to look forward to. And if you think about it in your own lives, you think about it, any time that there's any sadness in your life, or bad times, or difficult things to go through, the fact that you have something positive to look forward to, somewhere down the line, 2 weeks from now, a month from now, 6 months from now, that being able to hold on to that gives you a certain kind of happiness, and it tempers your sadness. No matter how bad your sadness might be, it tempers it somewhat, at least. So yes, the Jewish people are now losing Moshe, and yes, that's a very sad thing and very terrible for them. But the fact that they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael was very positive for them, and they were able to get some sort of relief from what would otherwise be their grief. Relief from grief, right? That could be a rhyme. And that's basically the parsha in a nutshell, and with some detail into some of the verses. I hope this sort of enlightens you a little bit in terms of understanding the parsha. This is not this week's parsha, right? We're going to read HaBracha here in America. We're going to read it on Simchat Torah, and then the next parsha is going to be Bereshit. So if you're learning Shnai Mikra Ve'echa Targum tomorrow, if you're not caught up yet with HaBracha, it would be a good idea to maybe catch up tonight, so that you can then go back to Bereshit starting tomorrow morning. Be ready for that when it comes. I'm going to stop the live feed to Facebook.